And now on Nights with Steve Price from the 50-Up Club, Christopher Zinn.
We talk to Christopher every Thursday night, and on Tuesday week we will have the federal budget in Canberra. I will be there, as will Ross Greenwood on the network. We'll look at all of the impacts on people around the country with particular interest on what it does to the 55 and overs. Because, Chris, I get a sense, and I spoke last night to Paul Rickard about this on the program about superannuation, that things like super in particular are going to be the targets of this budget, and high-income earners are going to get whacked as well.
Undoubtedly. I mean, the smoke signals have turned to very dark smoke, I think, as some older people might be concerned. And look, while, they talk about high-income earners now, I think, it's the thin end of the wedge. And frankly, once you start having a real go at superannuation, you can be sure that the thresholds and various things which they seek to bring down so that the tax take can be great or the concessions removed, who knows where that's going to end. So I think it's important that, there is adequate scrutiny and pushback where necessary.
Well, one of the things about these elections now, of course, is that the Liberal National Party know that their constituency, by and large, is older, post-50, post-55, and so they can do things at the upper end to that demographic, thinking or presuming that they're not going to get punished. I'm not sure they can always rely on that theory anymore, and we've seen that with the explosion in the number of votes that go to independents and crossbenchers. And I think the LNP and the coalition needs to really be careful that they don't have a go at their base in this budget, because the base is already fractured over the Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull stuff. If you start really belting them on things like investment properties and super, you're going to get a nasty shock if you are a marginal seat holder for the Liberal or National Party.
And look, you're close to the pulse of the nation on that. I think that's an entirely feasible argument, and part of the issue, as far as I'm concerned, is they're having a go at the contribution part of superannuation, i.e. where you put it in, not where you're taking it out, because that tends to be for people over 60. And the people taking it out are much more conscious of the cost to them, whereas the people putting it in are perhaps less conscious of the effect because it's delayed some years. So perhaps they're counting on the fact that there will be less complaint, less pushback by taking the action at the contribution part of the superannuation equation. And I think that's where, over 50s perhaps need to remind them that it is important, and because it has a direct bearing on how much they retire with and the level of their comfort in retirement. And, as we've heard so often, we're meant to save for our own retirement. Of course, better off people seek to have a higher, standard of living. There are concessions which they've enjoyed. Perhaps some of those are too generous. But look, any change, I think, as I said, needs scrutiny. And those who are affected need to make their displeasure felt, as opposed to just realise far too late in the game what has actually happened.
Well, we'll keep asking those questions. The last Swan-Gillard-Rudd budget, what they did was anyone earning in excess of $300,000 a year, their contributions to superannuation, the tax went from 15 cents in the dollar to 30. And there is discussion that $300,000 annual income, they might pull that back down as low as $180,000. That would impact on a lot of older Australians. And then you get people who say, well, for goodness sake, you're trying to encourage us all to put as much as possible into super so we don't have to live off the pension, and yet you're making it more and more and more difficult for people to make a meaningful contribution to their retirement through super anyway.
And eroding confidence, I'd suggest, in the super system. And, younger people who might not feel affected by this, but there are other options of what they can do, apart from the compulsory contributions in terms of concessional contributions, just might not feel it's worthwhile. And, that actually tends to erode the value or the size of superannuation. So, look, there are going to be changes, whether we like it or not. There's at the other end of the retirement income spectrum, there has to be more money found for those who are actually on the age pension. So obviously there's some change and tinkering, but how much and who actually bears the amount? As I said, it's fair that there is a really robust argument about this, and I'd hate older people to roll over and lie doggo and just think, one, it doesn't affect me, or there's nothing I can do. Actually, the effect is very direct and very strong.
You're going to poll the members of the 50-Up Club about the upcoming budget. What sort of questions are you going to be asking?
Look,
And then are you going to use that information in some lobbying capacity?
Yeah, look, definitely. I mean, I think we've got one up at the moment, which is what do you fear most in the budget? And I'm sure that we've already got some very voluminous answers and comments from people who, as you well know, are very fired up about this. But I'd suggest there's a whole lot of other people. Inevitably happens. It's only either right when it's in the budget, it's announced, or actually when it's implemented, suddenly realise that it affects them. And that's particularly true around superannuation because it's not something that you directly realise now. It has some effect on you in the future. And, you know, perhaps understandably, many people are disengaged from that. But it's a very important debate, one that we have, and we make sure that our voice is heard.
Well, 72 days now to go until polling day, if indeed we go on the 2nd of July, which it looks like we will. So once the budget's out, yes, it's great to poll people about what they fear in the budget. I think then, and I know you guys will do this, 50Up Club, what they need to do is then start asking questions about what people want from their next government if they are in that age bracket and who they think is best capable of delivering it. We already know Bill Shorten is going to attack negative gearing. That's not popular. The government's going to say that they won't touch negative gearing, but there will be aspects of both sides' policies that affect older Australians. And I think we just need to keep debating that and having that in mind, bearing in mind the age demographic largely of the people who listen to us. That's what they want us to talk about.
Exactly, and in a way that is fair, because, I mean, look, older people have children and grandchildren too who are finding it hard to get homes, and that may or may not be changed by adjusting the negative gearing system. But I think, you know, people are generally wise enough to have a wider view. Their own interest is one thing, their own family's interest is another, but they need to be heard. They need to have a voice. And if we can find a consensus through the polling in terms of negative gearing or superannuation or what people think is fair, then we will certainly amplify that loud and clear to the decision makers and, of course, to other voters.
Good stuff. People who want to join in that discussion, 50upclub.com.au. Christopher Zinn, talk to you next week.
Thank you very much, Steve. Good night.